Thank you very much. If you can put the PowerPoint presentation on. It's a pleasure to be here. It was magnificent 2 days, and I thank you, Ram, for inviting me, and the Indian Foundation for having this distinguished panel discussing those important subject matters. Our discussion this morning in the panel deals with international cooperation, with regional cooperation, with cooperative mechanisms that are needed to be built for counterterrorism. But with your permission, I would like to go, first of all, to discuss the pillars of counterterrorism. Before we discuss how we can cooperate in this troubled field, we need to understand what are really the pillars of counterterrorism, and I'm using the term the art of counterterrorism. In this room, we have many people which are dealing on a daily basis with counterterrorism in different capacities. Maybe we have students and scholars that are learning and teaching this subject matter. And I would like to argue that all of you are no less than an artist. Practically, to be a good and effective counterterrorism expert, it's to be an artist. And I would like to speak about the art of counterterrorism for a few minutes. The first pillar of this art is to identify who's the enemy, who's the opponent. And I would like to suggest the classification of 3 types of perpetrators of terrorism. The first type is commonly known under the name lone wolf. And actually, after listening to my colleague Avi Dichter yesterday, I would change it to lone dog. I think that's the way you use the term. The lone wolf are people which are being inspired by terrorist organizations. They are being exposed to incitement, they are being radicalized, and one day they decide to commit a terrorist attack. This is their own decision, and they don't have any operational ties with the terrorist organization. That's the lone wolf. The second type of perpetrators are those local independent networks that combine few lone wolves, if you wish, or lone dogs for that purpose. And usually we are talking about a bunch of friends, family members, in this case, San Bernardino in California, a husband and a wife. We had in Israel, in Sarona, in Tel Aviv, an attack not long ago of 2 cousins that again are being inspired by a terrorist organization, but do not have any operational ties to a terrorist organization. This is a different ballgame. And the third type is the organized terrorism. And this is the type that we all, unfortunately, used to experience in the last few decades. This terrorist attack is being initiated, planned, prepared, and executed by activists of a terrorist organization. Just to name a few attacks, Mumbai attack would be an organized attack. The attacks in Istanbul, in Bataclan in Paris, in Zaventem in Belgium, and so on and so forth. Now, when we are talking about the lone wolf attack, most of those attacks do not have many casualties. I'm not underestimating any victim of terrorism for that purpose. But how many people can be hurt from a lone wolf? Few people altogether that might die or being injured by stabbing, by running down, and so on and so forth. There are few exceptions, of course. The Nice attack is an exception, which you had dozens of people that died from one lone wolf attack altogether. But all in all, those are attacks which are, the number of casualties are quite limited. Organized terrorism is a different ballgame. Organized terrorism practically has many casualties, as we unfortunately saw in Mumbai and other places altogether. But on the other hand, organized terrorism can be thwarted if you have good intelligence, if you have good operational tools, and if you communicate well between the intelligence agencies and the operational units. But when we talk about lone wolf attacks, it's very difficult to prevent such attack. Why? Mainly because we used to believe, and I will explain in a minute why do I use the past terms, we used to believe that intelligence is helpless, is powerless in dealing with this type of attacks, the lone wolf attacks. Why? Because traditional intelligence, human and common, human sources intelligence, communication intelligence, is based on one common denominator. It's based on the fact that you have at least two people that communicate between them and share a secret. And you can intercept this discussion. But in a lone wolf attack, everything starts and ends with the sick mind of one person. So traditional intelligence is useless. But there is a solution for that. I'll talk about it in a moment. The other challenge that we are facing recently is what we refer to as the hybrid terrorist organization. Unlike what we used to know, the classical terrorist organization, Red Brigades, Bader-Meinhof, and so on and so forth, organizations that used to be some kind of a terrorist underground that conducted terrorist attacks. The hybrid terrorist organization is a terrorist organization that controls both territory and population, and is embedded within the civilian society. The hybrid terrorist organization is engaged also, on top of the terrorist attacks, in pseudo-legitimate activities. He needs to supply water, he needs to supply food, he needs to give education, law enforcement, and other services to the public that he controls. Unfortunately, we in Israel had to deal with hybrid terrorist organizations for many years. Hamas is a hybrid terrorist organization. Hezbollah is a hybrid terrorist organization. But until not long ago, many people around the world believe that this is an Israeli problem. Well, I have bad news. ISIS is a hybrid terrorist organization. ISIS controls territory and population. And if I would have been the consultant of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the first thing I would tell him is, you know what? Bring over international spectators and declare free election in the territory that you control. Bring Jimmy Carter, he likes that he can actually monitor this election. I can almost guarantee that he will win the election without guns pointing to the heads of the voters. Some of them would be very afraid of him. Some of them would vote because they believe in what he has to offer. And then what the international community would do, he's elected politically wise. He's elected. Hybrid terrorist organization is more dangerous than a classical terrorist organization. Mainly, by the way, because it's embedded within the civilian society. And when a liberal democracy is trying to contend and to fight against a hybrid terrorist organization that is covering himself with human shields, it's very difficult to do so without collateral damage, and we see that in different parts of the world today. The second pillar of the art of counterterrorism is what I call the rationale of the terrorists. Many people around the world tend to believe that terrorists are lunatics, irrational actors. I beg to differ. I would like to argue that terrorists, at least the terrorists I'm familiar with, and I'm generalizing here, are rational actors. How can I say that? I can say that because when we discuss what is a rational decision-making process, we understand that the process is a certain way in which you choose between different alternatives. You calculate costs and benefits of each one of those alternatives, and you are choosing the alternative which you believe is more beneficial than costly in order to achieve your goal. That's what each one of you is doing every day. This is what terrorists are doing as well. Terrorists are rational actors. My friends, this is the best news I could give you. Because if terrorists are rational actors, then counterterrorism experts, counterterrorism artists can understand the rationale and therefore have some leverage to change their behavior, to de-radicalize them, to prevent radicalization, to deter them from conducting terrorist attacks. The most important part of this type of activity is understanding their rationale. Now, I want to show you 4 pictures of lone wolves that have been conducted stabbing attacks in Israel in the last 2 years. And one thing you see in common denominator in those 4 pictures, the smile on the face. Those 4 Palestinians actually just now stabbed kids and civilians and have been caught, and now they are being brought to jail. Probably they would spend their life in jail. But still, they are smiling, and this is not an artificial smile. This is not a photo opportunity. This is a reflection of their rationale. And if we would not be able to crack this rationale, we will not be able to communicate with them, to deter them, to influence their behavior altogether. By the way, we don't have time to elaborate on that. If you want a hit, I believe that this smile is an outcome of consideration of the topic or the subject of honor. Because they have been brainwashed to believe that what they do is the honorable thing. And counterterrorism, counter-narrative, counter-radicalization should give exactly the opposite message. To do such activities, regardless what's the goal, this has nothing to do with honor. Now, going back to the lone wolf, I said we used to believe that intelligence is useless, but we have found in Israel, and I think that our colleagues in Europe and other places also have found that we have a compensation in intelligence to comment and humint in reference to the lone wolves. And the compensation is OSINT, open sources intelligence. A lot, I don't know if it's probably more than 50% of the recent perpetrators of the lone wolves attacks in Israel and outside Israel gave a prior warning on their social networks before they conducted the attack. This is the golden piece of intelligence if you know what to do about it. The third pillar of the art of counterterrorism is decoding the formula of terrorism. Now, if you would ask me if I can summarize everything I learned about terrorism for the last 30 years into one sentence, I can do it. And the sentence would be the formula of terrorism. Terrorism is a mathematical formula that has two factors: motivation, multiple operational capability. It means that when a certain group of people has both motivation and operational capability to conduct terrorist attacks, they would conduct attacks against you. Now, what is counterterrorism, therefore? Counterterrorism is all about lowering down the motivation that gives birth to terrorism, or lowering down the operational capability of the terrorists. It's enough on the face of it to deal with one factor, because if they have motivation and no capability, they would not launch attack, and vice versa. If they have capability but no motivation, attack would not occur. But the art of counterterrorism is to be able to lower down those two factors together. And this is easier said than done. Why? Because once you are trying to lower down the operational capability of the terrorists, how do you do that? There is only one way to do that. You fight them. You kill them, you arrest them, you confiscate their funds, you destroy their warehouses and weapons. That's what you do in countering their operational capability. But while you do that, like it or not, you raise their motivation to retaliate against you, and that's the boomerang effect in counterterrorism. How to deal with both factors simultaneously, that's the art of counterterrorism. Now, to sum this up into our discussion, we are talking about collaboration, we are talking about cooperation, international cooperation, and everybody is talking about that, and they are right. It's necessary to do so. It's necessary, first of all, because when we are talking about counterterrorism, we are talking about a chain of security. You are talking about the Indian Ocean region. This is a chain of security. If one link of the chain is weak, it risks the whole rest of the chain. Even if in India you would have a great intelligence, security capabilities, if neighboring countries would be a weakest link, it will endanger not just those countries, but also India. Therefore, to tighten this chain of security internationally wise, regionally wise, is crucial. This cannot be done without a definition of terrorism. I'm afraid that I'm a freak of a definition of terrorism. I'm trying to preach anybody who's ready to listen that there is a crucial need to decide internationally wise on one objective definition of the term. It's not a theoretical question, it's very operational wise. And unfortunately, most of the scholars, most of the decision makers, law experts agree that we can never reach one objective definition because this is a subjective term. Because we all know the saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I beg to differ. Terrorism is a strategy, it's not a goal. And I have to say that the definition that I use is terrorism is the deliberate use of violence aimed against civilians in order to achieve political ends. An attack against an army, military targets, is not terrorism by the definition that I use. It's guerrilla warfare, it's insurgency. And of course, anyone who deliberately attacks my soldiers, your soldiers, is your enemy. You have all the right to fight back. But it's your problem. It's my problem. Anybody who deliberately attacks my civilians, it's no more my problem. It's the problem of the international community. Now, India and Pakistan would never agree on just causes or not just causes. Is Kashmir a just cause to conduct violence or not? Is Palestine a just cause to conduct violence or not? Is Kurdistan a just cause or not to conduct violence? We would never agree on that. But we can agree that even if we believe that we have a just cause, the deliberate use of violence aimed against civilians should always be forbidden, regardless what is a just cause, what is a legitimate cause, what is a holy cause for that purpose. Unfortunately, this basic understanding is not very well accepted in the international community. This is the definition of the Muslim World League. And the Muslim World League is saying terrorism is an outrageous attack carried out either by individual groups or states against human being, against his religion, against his intellect, against his honor. All of that, fine, great, I adopt it tomorrow morning. But then, without a just cause. So if you have a just cause, you can do all of the above. I beg to differ. We need to take those causes out of the definition. To sum up, we have this need to create a global, I use the term global, which is a combination of global and local international cooperation. Based on this definition, we should outlaw terrorist organizations without taking under consideration our political concerns and interests. We need to prevent states from sponsorship of terrorism based on that definition. We need to stop incitement for terrorism based on this definition. And we need to create an international alliance, no less than that, that will be based on this definition, and will have a joint intelligence gathering, OSINT. I told you how important the OSINT is, and you don't risk any intelligence source by actually collecting and analyzing together this open sources intelligence. We need to have a joint counter-motivation campaign, what we discussed in the previous French speaker talk about the counter-narrative campaign. This could be done and should be done together, not alone, not a separate effort of every state. Joint operational capacities, or joint countering the operational capacities of the terrorist organization. Here I'm talking about joint units. Why should one state, small state in Europe, have a negotiation team, and another state neighboring 50 minutes away would have also a negotiation team? You can use the same skills and shift them from one country to another country. Joint training and joint technological R&D efforts. So we need to shift gears, and I would sum up my presentation by saying we need to move on and not talk anymore about better international cooperation. We need now to talk about joint counterterrorism effort. Thank you very much.